Okay. Hey everyone. This is my first time doing a YouTube live. So I think I'm now connected. I'm just gonna give it a few minutes just to see if anyone else is gonna join the show today. Thank you. Okay, cool. So you all do see me. I'll just give it maybe like 2 more minutes and then I'll go ahead and start the show. And let me also close my window. If you're just signing on right now, I'll go ahead and start the show in like another minute or two. And in the meantime, you're welcome to just chat. Hey Alexis, that's my brother in the chat. And Fletes and Betty. Oh, someone's here from Wisconsin. Also feel free to add in the chat if you're where you're tuning in from today. California, Bass Lake, Vancouver. That's cool. Minneapolis from the Philippines. This is awesome. Kitty. Okay. Okay. So it's 7:05, so I'll go ahead and get started with the show. And like I said, feel free to ask like any questions that you might have in the chat, and hopefully I'll try to keep up and answer anything, and just keep chatting away. This is really cool. Okay, so first off, I just wanted to introduce myself and the show and the UCLA Planetarium. So my name is Lisbeth Villafaña, and I am a first-year PhD student in astronomy here at UCLA. So I just started like end of September, my first quarter here. And if you're not familiar with like the UCLA Planetarium show as a whole, typically we have a planetarium on campus, and every Wednesday the grad students put together a show that's free to the public. So now that we're remote, we have figured out a way to do a show virtual, which is kind of nice since we now I guess have a broader, can reach more people. So that's a little bit just about the show and UCLA Planetarium in general. And just for today, the name of the show is Astronomy of Different Cultures, Mesoamerican Archaeoastronomy. So just to dive into that a little bit, this idea came from, I was inspired with this idea from a like decolonizing STEM reading group that we have here. Some of the grad students get together like every 2 weeks, and we were kind of just discussing how science is very westernized, and a lot of the like scientific advancements from other cultures have kind of been erased. So this is kind of and we like to discuss like what we can do moving forward to help that out, and this is my sort of way of putting that effort in. Since while I was putting this together, I actually realized I did not know much about Mesoamerica or any of these really cool fun facts that they had gotten of what they had accomplished. So really quick, it's kind of the way the show's gonna work is that I have planned kind of like a brief crash course on Mesoamerica history if you are not familiar with it yet, and then some like astronomy night sky basics. And we're actually going to have a virtual planetarium show as well using a software called Stellarium. So that's pretty cool too. And then after that, I'm kind of just going to go into some archaeoastronomy fun facts and how we know what these civilizations knew. And archaeoastronomy, if you haven't heard that word before, it's kind of a mix of like archaeology and astronomy. So it's kind of using the remains of ancient civilizations and trying to decipher them and see what astronomical knowledge they had back then. Okay, so moving on. About Mesoamerica. Okay, so Mesoamerica, I found it a little interesting. I've never taken a history of Mesoamerica course, and all I really knew before was I kind of used to group the Incas, Mayans, and Aztecs together, and I thought they were all pre-colonial and all ancient. And while putting the show together, I learned that they're actually not all ancient. So the which I will explain right now, but Mesoamerica just refers to the region that starts in central Mexico through Belize and then goes through Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and northern Costa Rica. And some of like the civilizations include Maya, Olmec, Toltec, and the Aztec. And I just had mentioned the Inca, so I apologize if I stumbled that in there, but the Inca actually are from modern day Peru and are in South America. And to distinguish a bit more, I have this little timeline here that was really helpful. So this is when I found out the Aztec are pre-colonial, but they're not ancient. They actually didn't really come around until the 1500s. Or like 1200s, so when they were conquered in the 1500s, so they came around in the 1200s, so they actually were only around 300 years before the Spanish conquest. And the Mayas, though, they are considered an ancient civilization, and it's believed right here in this timeline, it doesn't date all the way back to 1500 BC. There are some scholars that believe their civilization did start much earlier, but overall, in general, it's commonly accepted that they had already started like rising before Christ, BC time-wise, and they came after the Olmec. So, as well, and really quick, so then the Maya had like these 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years of time to have all these advancements. And originally, when I had this planetarium show in mind, I was like, okay, cool, like I used to associate the three of them together, and I was like, I'll just do research the astronomy of all three of them. As I got further into this, just as a heads up, this show will be more of a Mayan astronomy, and it makes sense because as I was researching more into it, as I mentioned, the Aztecs only had like 200-300 years of time to advance before they were conquered, so they didn't get much, they didn't progress as much because they only had 300 years compared to the Mayans that had 1,000. And they did have like some form of written language, and we see that in the ruins. But other than that, most of the information was burned by the Spanish when they conquered them, and we don't know much about. So that's why we don't know much about them. And as for the Inca, they were also relatively new. And I found out that they had a form of communication, but it was just these strings, and we still don't know how to decipher them. So that took kind of those two off of the table, and it left the Mayans, because the Mayans, since they had those 1,000 years to build, we have all these. They have all their written like hieroglyphs are left on the ruins, and in addition to that. They, as you see here, you could kind of see that there's little gaps in the timeline here. So what happened was that if you go back to this map really quick, they had originally settled like in Guatemala area, and Guatemala is a very tropical area, and they were really into agriculture, and the way they were really big on maize, and the way they would plant, because it's very hard to grow in the tropics, they would burn down stuff to create fertilizer, and then from there that would allow them to plant that year, but then they would have to keep moving. So eventually over time they ended up moving up, and that's why they ended up, one of their last settlements was near like Yucatan in central Mexico. So that's why no one really knows how, like, it's not really accepted how they started disappearing. They think it could have been like either a drought, a plague. There's a lot of different like theories on it. And when the Spanish did come and conquer them, there wasn't much left to conquer, and we still have a lot of how I said, we have the remains that are there, and then some of their writings were also found, which I'll be talking more about today, which I'm really excited about. Okay, so now to get more, that's your quick crash course on Mesoamerican history, if you didn't know that. And if I left anything out and you know any other fun facts about Mesoamerica, feel free to share them in the chat. And so now for the part of the other third of the show, I will be hosting like a virtual planetarium show using this app called Stellarium. If you haven't heard of it before, it's an open source software that's available online, and it's pretty cool, and you can go back in time, forward in time, so I'm really excited to get there. But really quick, just want to go through a few key like astronomy facts that may be helpful when we start thinking about what kind of skies the Mayans would see. So first of all, I just wanted to cover the concept that we see different stars in the sky depending on the time of year. And this picture here kind of shows this. It does a really good job showing that. So Earth orbits around the sun every year, right? And as it's orbiting, it's the objects in the sky that you see will be different because the position in space is different. Kind of like here, when Aquarius is in conjunction with the sun, which means it's aligned with the sun, it won't be visible, but instead you'll see the other side of this, like essentially the opposite side, if that makes any sense. And feel free to ask any questions, how I said in the chat. Okay, so that kind of helps us understand that the Mayans would have been seeing different stars or different objects in the sky at different times in the year. Something else that does factor into what you see in your sky is where you are on Earth. So essentially, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you will see something really different than if you were in the southern hemisphere. As you can see in this kind of picture, you'll see different constellation and groups of star depending on that. Okay, and this is kind of just a little depiction of some, again, astronomy basics. We astronomers use the word zenith to describe the point right overhead, and they call the meridian anything that goes from the right overhead, right over you, like that. And the horizon is anything that's 90 degrees from the zenith. So you can imagine it that anything above head, your horizon is just right overhead. So, and that plays a key factor into the sky you see as well. Because and in the way that it plays a factor is your latitude. So depending on your latitude on Earth, that's going to determine where your horizon is. So in LA, we are at oh gosh, I believe it's 44 degrees. And central Mexico, I was reviewing those coordinates more recently, is about 20 degrees, and Guatemala area is about 15 degrees. So the only difference that the Mayans would have had in the night sky we see today, it would just be slightly different. Some objects might be below the horizon, and they wouldn't be able to see. But we'll learn a bit more about what objects they were able to see. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. I think this might be the last key little fact that will help us understand what kind of sky the Mayans saw. So the Earth is tilted, right? And this tilt changes every 26,000 years. You can imagine it kind of like a top, like the toy tops that spin back and forth. So it's every 26,000 years, and we don't really notice it. And during a lifetime, like our lifetime, you wouldn't notice that change in the sky. But what is important to note is that because the Mayans ended up keeping like observations of the sky and were around for like 1,000 years, they would have noticed a very subtle change. So hopefully that kind of covers everything that the Mayans would have seen different in their sky. I said, feel free to ask any questions. And now I am going to switch over to the Stellarium app. So the Stellarium app is now open on my screen. And right now I am set to Los Angeles, and I am set to, I believe this is November 12th. So let me go ahead and change that to the 18th so that it reflects today. Okay. So this is the app. There's also a mobile app, I believe. I personally never checked it out. So, but the computer one is really cool. And if you're really interested in kind of stargazing and figuring that out, I would definitely recommend you can change the location to like anywhere on Earth. And you can also like toggle with different settings. You can try to like see what happens if you take off your atmosphere. And you can also like try to see meteor showers and exoplanets. So I definitely would recommend if you're into anything like that. Okay, so moving on with the rest of the show. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. And I also do have two other grad students helping me today. They're on the chat available for questions, as you probably all see right now. Okay, so I wanted to bring up another factor that would have changed how the Mayans saw their sky, and that is something called light pollution. So if you think about how the fact that first of all, if you live in a major city, you experience this every day. In LA, we don't see many stars, and that is because of the light pollution. I kind of included here on the lower side, you could probably see the map, hopefully see the map of the US. This is a description of the light pollution. There's an echo. As soon as you went to this app. Okay, let me see. Website we can access. I'm going to try to fix the echo really quick. Let me see. There is a slight delay on my end. It takes about 10 seconds afterwards to upload to YouTube. So if it doesn't get better, please let me know. But this is an app that you can, it's an open source software, so you can download it. It's free, it's on stellarium.org. Okay, so continuing on with the light pollution, as you can see, California here has it pretty bad. Most of the country does, except for somewhere here in the Midwest. There's some areas that don't have as bad light pollution. And you can actually toggle with that function of light pollution here on Stellarium. So that is also pretty cool. If you go here, you can take the light pollution from the location. So now you can see that earlier I didn't have that setting on and there was a lot of stars that were visible. Now that I've turned it on, you can see that the number has significantly decreased. And that just has a lot to do because of the light pollution. Essentially, all the light we have from like civilization ends up making the sky brighter, and that's why you can no longer see those stars. So when I will be going to back in time to the times of the Mayans, I will go ahead and remove all light pollution because they wouldn't have had any. And okay, the echo's gone now. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. Oh, hi, friends. Okay. Okay. So what's pretty cool, how I kind of already mentioned, you can go anywhere you want on Earth. You can go to other planets as well, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and now from LA change locations to Chichen Itza. Okay. So let me go ahead and do that really quick. Okay. So now this, as you can see down here, you see that it's located at Chichen Itza. And there's another cool, I thought it was pretty cool feature of Stellarium that I went ahead and did. You can have different landscapes. So this one is a random one that I pulled up right before the show started. But there's typically a generic one. And the generic one, you use the generic ones, or you can have, it already comes with these other landscapes included, or you can make your own. If you're interested, I can also like add that. You can leave a comment and I can add like the resources, like the links I use to figure out how to do that. But I'm pretty excited. I was able to create one for Chichen Itza. As you can see, you'll see the pyramids a bit more once it is daylight. So we'll be using that for the rest of the show. Okay. And so I'll talk more about Chichen Itza later on as we go on, but as you can already tell here in this little, like on the side here, this is kind of a diagram map of the area. This was one of the last places that the Mayans were at before they like kind of disappeared and the remaining were conquered. And the big pyramid is called El Castillo, and this is in Yucatan, like near in the Yucatan. So if you've ever been to Yucatan, Mexico, and you visited, you probably recognize this area. I've always wanted to go, and even more after putting the show together. They have a platform of Venus, so we'll find out soon how important Venus was to them. So another cool thing about Stellarium 2 is how I said you can travel back in time. So let's change this to a date where the Mayans were around. So I'm just gonna put 1200. So as you can see, the sky's kind of already changing, and I'm gonna let it run on normal time. But see here, you can see this is a simulation of what their night sky looked back in today's date in the year 1200, and we're at the location Chichen Itza. Okay. So if you now like that we're seeing like how clear their skies were, you can probably imagine that I'm going to take off all the light pollution. So you can see how bright their skies were, right? So you could probably imagine how like intrigued they were by the stars in the sky. And they actually collected a lot of data. They didn't have any telescopes back then, but with just their like naked eye, they collected all this data, like thousands of years, and they tracked positions of different objects in the sky, which I'll be talking more about. One of the reasons was because of their agriculture. As I already mentioned, different objects in the sky appear during different times of the year from that one picture. So if you were to have, by tracking those different objects in the sky, that is directly related to seasons, and that's how tracking all these objects really helped them with growing maize. And also another reason why they focused a lot on tracking these is because they believed that these objects like the moon, and that I'll be talking more about, were actually celestial deities. So they worshiped them and they were gods, and they thought that these gods were actively involved in human affairs, and that's why they devoted they also devoted a lot of time and energy into figuring out their movements, because they wanted to make sure that their gods always remained pleased, because otherwise it would mean some kind of like disaster for their civilization somehow, which I'll talk more about. So this is kind of just a depiction of what the Mayan universe was to them on the bottom right corner. How I mentioned, they believed the celestial gods were above, and then they thought Earth was like the neutral like world that they lived in, and then they believed that the underworld existed below them. A quick picture here too on the bottom right now is of the underworld and the upper world connected through this world tree. I was like, when I was researching, I found like this resource that said that, I found like two that said that the Mayans also believed that Earth was like situated on this reptile's back, and that the mountains on Earth were created through like the motion of this reptile. I thought that was really interesting, but I couldn't find enough resources to feel comfortable. So if you all have free time and want to look that up on your own, if anyone knows that, what are the blue looking stars? I am looking there. Those are the Taurids. It's a meteor shower that So, and that's also cool about Stellarium. You can zoom in on any objects and it'll give you like all the information, astronomy information about it. Okay, so returning back to the Mayan universe. Sorry, I got a little distracted by checking out the questions on the side. So they actually believed, so back to this diagram here, they believed a lot of their deities, which were stars in the sky or celestial objects, would travel through the day, and then at nighttime they would enter the underworld. So I'm going to go ahead and change the setting really quick just so we can get started with our virtual planetarium show for now. Oops, okay. So, that's the other cool thing. You can also like speed up the time that, like, you can toggle with how fast it goes and just see different aspects of the day. So now that it is daytime, you can see the pyramids. I thought it was pretty cool. This one is called El Castillo, and then I was trying to figure this out with a friend. I think that one might be the Venus one. So yeah, it's pretty cool just looking around. This is meant to be the area of Chichen Itza, which, how I said, is in the Yucatan. Okay, so in the daytime, you can go ahead and write what you think that they were most fascinating by and what was the brightest. So it was the sun. So the sun, because it was, which is, I think it's Kikinwa. I apologize for the pronunciation. I've been watching a lot of videos, but it just slipped my mind right now. But he was the chief god of the Mayans, and he was their main god. And how I said, they believed the deities traveled through the day and then entered the underworld at night. And in particular, they thought that the sun would change to a jaguar god, as it entered the underworld, which is really interesting too. And a lot of the rulers identified themselves as the sun and were worshipped as like the sun's incarnation on Earth. Okay, and then I also wanted to include this, which is really cool. These are some of the hieroglyphs of the Mayans that means sun. So they had three like different ones that all meant sun, and you can tell that this means sun by the 4 petals. So anything kind of with this 4 petal looking thing can either mean is associated with the kin glyph, and it either means sun or day. So it's one of those two. Okay, so. Oops, I kind of jumped the gun. I was going to ask now that if, let's say, the sun had turned into a jaguar and traveled below the horizon, and it was now nighttime, what would be the next brightest thing in the sky? Or the next biggest thing? And that is the moon, right? So the moon was also one of their gods. It seems like they had different moon gods, but overall it seems there's some consensus that their primary one was the goddess Ichel, which is on the left, and she was thought to be the goddess of childbirth, birth. And in Mayan mythology, they generally associate the moon with a maiden, an old woman, and or a rabbit. And they think that the sun god gave the rabbit to his mother, who was the moon, after he found the rabbit causing the weeds to grow in the garden during the night. So that was kind of a little fun fact about their myth, fun myth fact. And this is a hieroglyph for the moon right here. And these are other hieroglyphs right here with the moon. These are the ones that depict the rabbit. As you can see, the rabbit the rabbit kind of right there, and that would be the moon goddess. So the story goes that the sun god gave the rabbit to his mother, and this is kind of a picture of the moon goddess holding the rabbit. And if you're like wondering where that came from, I don't know if Stellarium will let me get in that close to a full moon, but I found this diagram that I thought was pretty cool and kind of like really made sense. That if you were to look at the moon during a full moon, you see you can see the Maria, which are like the seas. They're not really seas on the moon, but they look like them. And if you look at that shape, you can see that it kind of does resemble this like rabbit head, rabbit body. And that's where that story or myth came from. Let me see if I can zoom in on the moon. Oh, cool, sick. I can zoom in on the moon. So right now we're in a full moon on Stellarium. And just to point it out here on the virtual app, you can kind of see the rabbit, I guess, is like right there. So these are all just like kind of fun facts. Oh, Japan also talks about the rabbit. That's really cool. Yeah, it's right there. Okay, so next, right, just wanted to talk really quick about eclipses. So these are the hieroglyphs that represent eclipses in Mayan and for the Mayans. And just want to review eclipses really quick. So there's two types. There's solar eclipses and lunar eclipses, right? During a lunar eclipse, the Earth is between the sun and the moon, and Earth's shadow falls on the moon. So and that happens at nighttime. Whereas a solar eclipse, the sun appears to cover all of the moon from the Earth, and it occurs during the day, because the moon moves between the Earth and the sun, if that makes sense. And just a quick little fun, I wanted to see if you all wanted to send in the chat and try to guess which one is which. How I said, one represents the solar eclipse and one represents the lunar eclipse. So if you are all down to just type in the chat away and try to guess it, I'll kind of see if I can give some hints. If you remember, just remembering these are the sun hieroglyphs, and then these right here represent the moon. So based on that, which of these do you think is a solar eclipse and which do you think is a lunar eclipse? And I'll just give a few seconds in case people want to type away in the chat right now. Okay. Okay, I see a few people are starting to answer, so, okay, cool. So I'm gonna go just review really quick again after I've given you the hints. Anything with like 4 petals represents the sun. So if you look here, you have something that has the 4 petals and kind of like a sun. So this one here represents an eclipse of the sun. And this one right here, you can see that kind of slither that you see up here when they depict the moon. So this one on the right represents a lunar eclipse. Yeah, it was kind of fun trying to figure that out too. But I had an answer key, I'm not gonna lie, so that helped a lot. Okay, so now after the moon, right, let me zoom out of this view from the full moon and hopefully not get distorted. Okay. trying to do this slowly. I usually have this habit of doing it really fast and then getting dizzy. Um, so, okay. So what else is in the sky other than the sun, the moon, and yeah, other than the sun and the moon, what else is in the sky that's pretty bright? I'll see if you all have a few guesses. Um, Another hint is that they're currently visible on the screen right now. Okay, so the next big thing that is seen are planets, and they are often like confused for as stars. They're very bright. The way you can tell that if it's a planet or star is that, sorry, excuse me, planets don't twinkle. So with stars, you see like this twinkling effect, and planets don't. And they're the next brightest things. So the Mayans also did keep track of the planets as well. And here on the left is the hieroglyphs that represent Mars, and this one and the two bottom ones represent Venus, and then the one over here on the right, that one represents comet, or like the tail of a star. And so they did keep track of the planets. I said there are some records of them keeping track of Mars movements, but the one that was most important to them, do you all want to guess? Okay, you can guess. It was Venus. So let me go ahead and change the slide. Oops, wrong. It was Venus. Here is a Venus glyph. They had different names for it. They had Noek, which is like great star, Chakek, which is red star, Sastolek, which is bright star, and another, I think it's Suksek, which is Wap star. And it was the most important heavenly object other than the sun. And they knew when it would rise with the sun, they knew when it increased and decreased in brightness, they knew when it completely disappeared, they knew when it set with the sun. They were just actually like pretty obsessed with Venus, in my opinion. But the reason for this is that it helped them with agriculture, and it also they kept a lot of good track of this because they took certain times of like certain phases of Venus, or like different periods it was passing through, as like a sign of chaos in their actual world. So they really wanted to be prepared for that kind of stuff. But because the Mayans didn't realize that Venus and Earth were orbiting the sun, they instead tracked the motion of Venus as it appeared again in the sky. So like essentially Venus has a shorter orbit than Earth does around the sun. So even though Venus's orbit's like around 200 something days, it takes a synodic cycle, which is what the time it takes for it to get back in the same place in the sky, is 584 days. It's actually like 583.9, but the Mayans predicted it to be 584. I'll be discussing that a bit more once I get into the archaeology segment and how we know about that. But this is why the Mayans were really obsessed with Venus, because and the mythology behind it too is that they believed whenever Venus would rise with the sun, they believed that Venus was upset at the sun because the sun like beat it in conquest, like in the beginning of times, because it's like the second brightest object. I should also go to a location where Venus is present. I will find that soon. But yeah, they were upset that they thought Venus was upset being the second brightest object and was always trying to fight the sun. And so Venus ends up being a morning star, which it rises with the sun for 263 days, right? And then 50 days it disappears. And that's when the Mayans believed that it would go Venus would enter the underworld and then try to fight someone there. And then it comes back up for another 263 days, and that's when they believed that Venus was trying to now fight the sun again. And then it ends up being absent for like 8 days again. There's a really cool YouTube, I forgot to switch slides. There's a really cool YouTube TED Talk that explains this really well. But essentially, there's 5 cycles of 584 days, ends up being 8 years, and like what Venus will look like in the sky will repeat every 8 years. And the Mayans did like a really good job at predicting this, and they predicted the different cycles of Venus. Oops. Okay. Okay. And this right here represents 584, and it represents, how I said, the time it takes for Venus to come back to the same location. And then these are the 5 cycles of it, which take overall 8 years, and the different phases of Venus repeat during that time frame. Okay. Oops. So I don't have Venus here, but I wanted to ask, what do you think would be the next brightest thing, other taking planets away? What do you think would be the next brightest thing? And I'll go ahead and take a few guesses. I just have to make sure I am in the right time frame, like the right month, to be able to see this. November to May. Okay. Serious. Okay. I will give more hints. You can't see it in LA because of light pollution, but if you have clear skies, you can see it. Right now, I'm trying to fast forward to that time. It is only present in this. It's only visible in this area from November to May. So I need to make sure. Right now we're like November 23rd, so just to be safe, I'm gonna go ahead and, not Mars, it's not a planet. Okay. I think it's becoming more visible. And just to kind of explain what I'm doing here, I never really explained how to use Stellarium. If you are interested, there's this whole toolbar here. There's a lot of like user-friendly like how-to guides available online. But down here is this toolbar, and you can fast forward in time, pause, go at regular time, and all these other things here. Constellation lines, cardinal points, ground. Okay, so I'm looking in this part of the sky. Does anyone see it there? There's also full moon, so let me Milky Way, someone said it, but I'm gonna go ahead and try to fast forward to another time where the moon's not out, just because the moon also adds more brightness into the sky. So if there's a full moon, it'll be harder to see. I think this is a bit clearer to see now. Yeah, so the Milky Way is right there. The Milky Way was represented by this hieroglyph right here. It looks kind of like this dragon, and it arches at dusk during the dry season, which again is November to May. It arches over the horizon right here. You can see it kind of like going in, right? Also, another fun fact, if you're like don't know as much about astronomy, the Milky Ways are the galaxy we live in, and it is a spiral galaxy, right? When you look at it head face on, but we live in the spirals. So when you from Earth, you see like a thin disc, and that's why it kind of looks like what people refer to as this pancake, this like edge right there. So a little bit about the Mayan story and the Milky Way. They believe that it was this reptile that extended across the sky, and his body extended from the sky deities, and then went into and connected it to the underworld. So if you like remember this depiction, really in the very, very beginning of the Mayan universe, I'll stop when I get to it. Right here. If you remember, the underworld was below, and then the upper world was above, where the celestial deities lived at. The Mayans believe the Milky Way kind of like was associated with this world tree, and some of them believe that the Milky Way had two separate designations. That part of it was like the white road, and took you up to the upper world, and the other one was the dark, which is the dark region of the Milky Way, took you to the underworld. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, there you go. So that's pretty cool, and it's if you can see it right there, there's a lot of meteor showers going on. Probably, let me toggle that off. There you go. So it's less distracting, and you can see the Milky Way right there. Okay, so gone through the sun, the moon, and we've also gone through Venus, and the other planets, and the Milky Way. So what else is left is all the stars, which they have a full view at the time, right? So these are kind of just some hieroglyphs associated with stars. They were less important. I do want to mention that they didn't like worship them like they did they worship the sun or Venus, or have like as many myths. But the thing is, as I mentioned again, different stars rise at different times of the years, so they use the stars' motions because they're less variable and they like stay more consistent. They used it to like tell time, and it helped them a lot with agriculture planning. Yeah, one of my friends was like, wow, they're really into Mayans. Yeah, they really were. That they kind of, everything seemed to kind of revolve around Mayans and their worshiping. So then there was a few names for stars, and one of them was Ek. If you remember when I was talking about Venus, they had a few names with Ek, like so that Ek means star, and they also refer to a star to the spots of a deer or a jaguar. Ek can either mean star or the spots on a jaguar, but a jaguar skin was usually a symbol for a starry night. So that's what this hieroglyph there means. This second one comes from a codex, which I'll talk more about soon. And it honestly, I just thought it was kind of a cool picture. It represents like stars are the eyes of the night, and it's kind of like this astronomer seems to be observing the sky, and his eyes like completely going out of his like socket. Like if you remember, they didn't have any telescope, so maybe that's how he felt, like trying to focus. But yeah, I just thought it was a cool picture, and it comes from one of their codices. But some more back to information on stars. This was their hieroglyph that meant stars. These concentric rings here, they can either mean star or water, depending on how the glyph is used. And anything that has like this MW with these two like rings represents a very bright star or a planet. And birds place, this is called a skyband, and this skyband is seen in, oh, I don't know if you can see my pointer. I'm now realizing that. The bottom right one, that one represents a skyband, and there's some of these glyphs are found in Chichen Itza, which is the pyramid that I was displaying on Stellarium. And anything right here, like with, this is anything with a bird, it depicts a star, and you can tell that because of this part of the glyph, the two, like the WM and the two rings in it. Okay, so quick question, I'll give you all a quick moment to think about it. This is a turtle glyph, right? And how would you know that if it was associated to the night sky or not? And feel free to type away in the chat and see if you picked up on any new things today about Mayan Mayan glyphs. I could not pronounce that now. Yeah, cool, Ernesto. Yeah, the star symbol right there. So now you know if you ever see a Mayan glyph and you see that, that represents a star, which I think is pretty cool. And okay, now on to the next object, but I need to make sure that I am in the time June in the time frame of like June, I believe. So let me go ahead and just jump months really quick. Oh wow, see the night sky change, that's really cool. And you can see the Milky Way like, even more. Wow, oh wow, that's cool. Okay. Let me find. Okay. I am trying to look for the Pleiades right now. But meanwhile, hopefully you can just enjoy how beautiful this sky looks. Wow, I really wish I was alive back then and see that. Well, I've seen it before at Joshua Tree. Fun fact, if Joshua Tree is a dark sky place, and I was able to see it there. So the Pleiades is an open star cluster, and it contains about like 400 like stars that are gravitationally like bound together, and so they stay in that group. The Western name for it is the Seven Sisters, even though like usually you can only see like 6 easily at night, but a darker sky would show more stars, and it's like if with a full moon it's completely covered though. Maybe I should check if there's a full moon right now. Okay, let me fast forward a bit then to try to find it. And the symbol for the Pleiades was the rattle. And this one was really important because the Pleiades was really important to the Mayans because, again, it regulated their agricultural calendars. In March, when the Pleiades set with the sun, the Maya knew it was time to burn their fields and prepare the cornfields for planting. And how I said, then they would use the ashes they would then use the ashes to use as fertilizer, and then the Pleiades would rise at dawn on June 13th when the heavy rains would begin. So I should go to June 13th. That's probably the date. That is why we're not seeing it yet. But hopefully you can see how cool this app is, that I am not on the right date, so it's not visible. And that you can time travel. That's, I think, what I was like really most excited when I was like putting the show together. And can you point out what represents a star again? Oh yeah, really quick, right here, please. It's anything that has like an M or W shape with those 2 rings. So you'll see it a lot. It either means star or planet. So I'm gonna go back a few slides too. So like here, you kind of see like that MW with the rings on the Venus glyph. So, and you also see it there, and same here. And I wonder, I don't seem to notice it on the Mars one. But it makes sense because Venus was called like morning star, or it always ended with ek, and this one was a comet, represents comet, which is the tail of a star. So Mars doesn't seem to have it. And you can also see it here. Oh, it might be too small. I can show once I switch over. Okay, for the sake of time, because we're somehow running out of time already, I'm going to, I can't find Pleiades, but just know this is what Pleiades represents, and I'm going to go ahead and move on, just because I want to get to like the cool archaeoastronomy stuff. So next is just really briefly their North Star. When I was talking about precession and how Earth's like the way Earth's axis is tilted like switches like a top every 26,000 years, and I briefly mentioned that the Mayans were around long enough to see some kind of change. The classic Mayans, which is like 200 to like 800 AD, they actually didn't have like a North Star. If you can see right here, there's nothing that's like pointing to that, and this was a cool diagram I found. The later like Mayans, they did have the North Star, and its name was Axamanek, excuse my pronunciation, and it was associated with the rain god, and it was a guiding star as well. Okay, The next one is the Big Dipper, and that one, his name, the Big Dipper, was called Seven Macaw, and it was a parrot named Seven Macaw, and the Little Dipper was called the Shield, and now I'm gonna just keep going on for the sake of time. Okay, so now I can go ahead, and there's another feature within Stellarium, which is really, really cool. It's called Star Lore. So they actually do have like constellation images for different cultures, and they have the Mayan. So I'm gonna go ahead and show labels, show constellation lines, and then let me use native names for planets. And then show art. They also have this really cool art. So if you look here, these are some of their constellations. So with that, I'll just kind of briefly start talking a bit about the Mayan Zodiac. So there's still some disagreement among Mayan scholars concerning these constellations. There's not one archaeological site that contains all of them. And many of them are eroded or worn beyond recognition, but generally it's kind of believed that there was 13 animal constellations in the Maya Zodiac, and each of them holds a sun in their mouth. So right now we are in, what month are we in? We are in June, right? So if you look here in June, Gemini is in conjunction, which means it's not visible in June. So I would guess then that this portion of the zodiac would be visible. Let's see. Oh yeah, and the Scorpion is right here. That corresponds to the western constellation of Scorpio. So I can take off the art really quick. And that's in, no, that's, let me take off the art. Okay. So you can kind of just see the lines and kind of guide that. So right here is the Scorpion, if you can see that constellation right there. And then over here, right behind the pyramid, is the snake. And the fish snake is the western constellation of Sagittarius. And here are also their hieroglyphs. They might be really small, but I'm about to switch over to just a PowerPoint slides, and I can show them again if anyone's interested in seeing that. And the shark, let's see. There's the shark and the toad, so let's look those up really quick. The toad and the shark, I don't think they are part of what is believed to be the Mayan Zodiac. So I'm going to just keep allowing time to pass so we can see the other zodiac constellations really quick. Okay, so now we have the Jaguar, which corresponds to Aries, the western constellation of Aries. And I'm going to put the art back on. If you would prefer me to take off the art, let me know, or I can toggle back and forth. If anyone in the audience has any preferences, please let me know. I know the screen can get a little crowded on this program. Okay, and then the bat represents the western constellation of Aquarius. And let me keep on going fast forward really quick, and I'm gonna kind of, okay, oops. Oh, so because I left the art on, you can still see them, even though the stars aren't visible themselves, and that just has to do because of the fact that the stars are always there and their art is there. So the bat right here, how I said, it corresponds to Aquarius, and then we have the vulture. That is just another one, and just a different constellation. We have the owl, which is bird 2 and corresponds to Gemini, right there, and then the turtle corresponds to the Orion constellation. And Let me fast forward that a bit again. So these are all the constellations that technically, and well, not technically, that in June you couldn't see, you can't see in central Mexico, and that's just because they are up, they are visible during the daylight, and the sun is too bright for them to be visible. This is another constellation called the Paddler Gods, and that one right there is, what is this one called? The toe, is that? No, that's Death. That's, yeah, the constellation they referred to as Death, and this one right here is Toad, which I believe might be correspond here to, if it's a frog, then it corresponds to Cancer. And keep playing this a bit more. Okay, yeah, there you go. So now they're all kind of coming back up. I can continue to fast forward maybe just to another time of year and see if like we see different constellations, but for the sake of time, I want to just get through the really last portion of this, and but let me know if you have any other questions. And really quickly before I get off of Stellarium, how I said, there's other cultures here. If you're interested in downloading the app, I definitely recommend. There's other cultures, and you can like put any of those constellations and their artwork if it's available on there, and I thought that was really cool. Okay, so now I want to transition over so I could talk a bit more about like the archaeoastronomy part of it. Double checking, you can now just see only the slide, right? And in case anyone wanted to see the Mayan Zodiac, I'll leave that up for like briefly if you're interested in seeing what the Capricorn constellation looked like or was called. That's Aquarius, the Pisces, Aries, and then Taurus, and then Orion, Gemini, and Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. Okay, and this was just kind of a picture to show you that it's really cool that you can get the art for, it's called the Star Lore thing. And okay, so you might be asking, so like how do we know all of this? How do we know that they knew all of this? The Mayans were really advanced. They're one of the few few of the Mesoamerican civilizations that had like the written language, and it did take us like apparently several years to like figure it out, but they did have a written language, and how I mentioned they left it inscribed in all of their building structures. And another thing I hadn't mentioned is that their language is hieroglyphs, and they do have pictures that depict like multiple words. That it could be, how I said, for example, sun can either, the sun one can either be sun or day, but they also did have an alphabet and could like write words, so you just kind of had to guess. It depended on who was writing it. And other than that though, what is really cool and I thought was really interesting was that there's codices, which are these manuscripts that survived the widespread Spanish book burnings of the conquest period, and that's actually how we know a lot of this stuff, and how we know that they tracked all the like the planets that they did track. Sorry, there's 4 of them technically, but 3 are widely accepted by scholars, so I'm only going to cover those 3. The 4th one is believed to be like some kind of translation of an earlier one, and some scholars still don't accept it. So I'll only be covering the 3 codices. Okay, so the first one that's like which most considers the most important in terms of archaeoastronomy is the Dresden Codex. It is named after its current location. It's located in the Royal Library in Dresden, where it was bought in 1739, and about half the glyphs can be deciphered. So it's pretty wild because we know a lot from it, but we still are missing like half of the information this book covers. It's made of inner bark and a fig tree, and it's 3.5 meters in length and folded into 39 leaves. And it includes an eclipse table that predicts when eclipses will occur. And it goes back to at least Yeah, I can, Elaine. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I definitely can. I can do that. So then codex. So back to the lunar eclipses, the eclipse table. So the Dresden Codex has an eclipse table, and it goes back all the way to 683. So they had predictions for that long, and they had to have had like some kind of knowledge of the like astronomical knowledge by the time of that date. And then also, aside from the eclipse table, it also includes a Venus table that predicts the times when Venus appears as morning star and the other like phases it appears. And pages 46 to 50 of the manuscript contain this Venus table. It's divided into 5 periods of 584 days, and that's how they ended up identifying that it was a Venus table. And it shows it ends up being like 5 pages of just these tables, and each page refers to one period of 584 days. And then lastly, in this codex, in this manuscript, there's also a Mars table that records the times when Mars goes into retrograde motion, and a table that tracks the planet's motion along the ecliptic, right? And I didn't mention what the ecliptic is, but it's the sun's motion across your sky. So they were tracking Mars motion like that as well. So all those 3 tables, which I find very fascinating to have been like, they were around, basically they started these observations, they were keeping track and predicting in 683. So while Europe was in the Dark Ages, and that I found that online, and I thought about that, while Europe was in the Dark Ages, you had this civilization that was here making all these observations with just their naked eye, and they kept track of it, and we've now deciphered it. So these predictions would require, aside from the astronomical knowledge from tracking, in order to predict, you'd also need some kind of math system, and they use the concept of 0, but our numbering system is currently a base 10. They have a numbering system based off 20, and here's all the numbers right here on this picture on the bottom right, and also examples of their math. I will be honest with you, I was able to figure out 28. I'm still not quite sure about 433. So if you're able to figure that out, let me know. But they did have this math system already in place, and that allowed them to make all these predictions. Okay. So there's 3, as I said, I'd be covering 3 codices, and the next one is the Paris Codex, and this one was discovered in 1859. This is the codex where it is believed that they depict the zodiac constellations, and it's kind of just like a codex with other information about stars and constellations, and it's been interpreted by various researchers as the Mayan Zodiac, but how I said, there's not really quite an agreement just yet. They think that it's the zodiac because they have these bands here of stars, and it's like animals holding the sun in their mouth. And there's part of the zodiac that's on one of the walls of a building in Chichen Itza. Okay. The last one to cover is the Madrid Codex, and actually this I found online. It's pretty cool. If you're interested, I could put the website but down below. You can actually find the Madrid Codex online. I mean, it's all hieroglyphs though, so I couldn't read it unfortunately, but it's there. This is from the website, and it's similar to the Dresden Codex, and it contains like astronomical information about the planets and the stars, and some like information about their calendar system. The other difference is that it also includes agricultural tables and their deer hunts and beekeeping, like time devoted to that. And it's also, there's another part. There's not really consensus to when it was written, primarily because there's also a portion that includes like Mexican an almanac of central Mexico. So they scholars aren't sure when it dates back to, or if it was written earlier and then updated once they like migrated to central Mexico. So a bit, how I said, the Madrid Codex tells us a bit about their calendar system. So I wanted to, this is one of the last few things I am going to cover today, and the calendar system was one of the most intricate and like complex of ancient calendar systems, and one of the most accurate ones as well. It's different than the Gregorian calendar that's now used through most of the Western world. It's made up, so 20 days make up a month, Maya month, and 20 days is a kin. And then 1 year is 18 20-day months. Okay, so you have 20 days in a month, 18 months in a Maya year, and one Maya year is 360 days, and it's called a ton. And then the Mayas used the next 20 years as a division of time and termed 20-year period as a katun. So you have 20 kins in 1 month, and then 18 months in 1 year, which is called a tun, and then you have 20 years is called a katun, and then 20 katuns is called a buktun, and is 400 years. And they had 2 calendars. They had the calendar round and the long count. Technically, it ends up being 3 because one of those calendars has 2 parts. One of them is for the calendar round. They kind of actually like move like that too. It's pretty cool. I saw a video like they move like in circles. One of the calendars is a 260-day Tolkien cycle, but this one was like mainly religious. Wasn't used as much. And then they have a regular like 365 solar day year, and the cycles align. Those 2 calendars end up aligning every 52 years. The second calendar, or third, however you're counting, is the Maya long count, and that one's based on a 360-day calendar, and it was the way that Mayans used to record dates, and it started about 5,000 years ago. And a fun fact I found, again, couldn't find as many resources, was that there was only within like a 19-minute margin of error from the actual solar year in the tropics. If anyone else wants to check that, but there was only 1-2 sources I could find that on. Every other source just said it was one of the most accurate of all like ancient calendar systems. So as I was like organizing this, planning this show, I was like asking some friends what they might want to hear, or might expect from the show, and I almost completely forgot about the Mayan 2012 prophecy that happened like 8 years ago, which is wild because one of my siblings was like really into this, I guess you could call it like conspiracy theory, and I remember watching stuff on the History Channel. Anyways, I just wanted to cover it briefly, and it was like a misconception from the very beginning. I found something like on a NASA website, which was nice because it was like reliable, that it was from the Dr. John Carlson, the director of Center of Archaeoastronomy. He's quoted for saying that the calendar didn't end on that day, and there was like no prophecies like foretelling the end of the world on that day. It kind of just went like it kind of just went off as like an internet thing, and it like blew up, in a sense. But the way it was explained was that like if you were to think of the calendar in like modern day kind of typography, you think of it as like an odometer, and it's cyclic and can restart. So the calendar was originally created 5,000 years ago, right? And we would see that date as like 3,114 BC, and like if you're thinking about it as speedometer, let's say there's like a number 13,000 like on it, right? As all the years pass, it just keeps going, right? And then suddenly on December 21st, 2012, it looked the same, and but it could restart, and and basically during that time period, 13 Baktuns had elapsed, and if you remember, a Baktun was 400 years, so 13 had elapsed, and 13 Baktuns was a significant interval for the Mayans, but it wasn't ever a destructive one, and there was nothing. All of the ruins, tablets, and stones that archaeologists examined didn't like say anything about the end of the world. So the best way to put this analogy is kind of like our calendar. When we end a year in December, we just start another one in January. That was kind of the same thing with the Mayan calendar as well. So I hope that clears that up if you were ever wondering about that, or if you were like me and kind of forgot about that. So Okay, last very thing that's very briefly, hopefully, thank you all for staying along, tuning in. Hopefully, you've all learned a lot. The last thing of like how we like know about their astronomical accomplishment, and this is also very common with other Mesoamerican like cultures, like or civilizations, like the I believe the Zapotec had some like some buildings that aligned with the like astronomical events, but for the sake of time and like the purpose of the show, I was only able to get one. Oh, cool, thanks. Yeah, if you have any fun facts, please let me know. So there's a lot of like temples, pyramids, buildings, and this is kind of like, I hope I can explain why I ended up picking the Chichen Itza, and why I ended up picking that as the background and the location for the Stellarium virtual show. It's because so the pyramid that was there is called El Castillo. And also another fun fact that I want to mention too was that Chichen Itza actually has like two different areas and two different types of architecture, and that's because the older one was actually there before the like Toltecs. So the Toltecs used to also live in this area before, and if I were to go back to the timeline really quick, oops, hopefully this doesn't take too long. If I go back here, the Toltec were around during this time. So the Mayans got to the Yucatan like around that maybe midway. So but they left. They ended up leaving the Yucatan. So the Toltec had originally settled there, and part of this area in Chichen Itza, if you've ever gone to Yucatan, Mexico, and gone to see the pyramids there, part of it was from the Toltec, and then the newer section was constructed after them. And the El Castillo is this 79-foot pyramid. And the really cool fact about it, in my opinion, was that during the solstice, which is when you have equal amount of daytime and nighttime in, I believe it is, I should know this, March and September. No, it's whenever you mark the first day of fall and spring. Sorry, I'm blinking out a little bit on that right now. But whenever you have the solstice, the equinoxes, when you have the equal amount of daylight, at near this area, you actually get like the sun directly above, and the shadows disappear on vertical objects. You can also see that there, but the really cool part is here that you see the light going down the pyramid, and you kind of see a snake there, and it like is illuminated, and the snake head right there. And they some scholars believe it was based off of their sun god, and that they were like it was to show that the equinox and their time of like agriculture was meant to begin. So that was also why I picked that as like the location for the Stellarium app. And another cool part about it too was that there's a Mayan observatory in that area, and it's called El Caracol, which means like snail in Spanish. And they believe that they have some, thank you, March and September, and that, so then they had these staircases, and it's a little ruined now, like it's a little worn down, the ruins are worn down, but there was like a spiral staircase that would lead upwards, and it was placed at a location where it would get an astronomer, which was typically their priest, like overhead, a priest or something, like overhead, where from all the bushes in that jungle area in the tropics. And the reason they think it was an observatory is due to the way that some of the windows align with like astronomical objects. In particular, like there's 3 of the windows that align with specific phases of Venus, and so that was the main reason why I picked that area. And that is about all I have for you all today. I can show really quick Stellarium on another planet, but I am open to any like other questions you may have, and I just hope you all learned a lot about Mesoamerican astronomy. When I started this, how I said, I realized I didn't know much of Mesoamerica history, and kind of like incorrectly grouped them all together. But I mean, I didn't. I feel like in history courses you typically just learned about the Spanish conquest. So I didn't know any of that. So I hope you all learned about that. If you take anything away from this today, the Mayans were great astronomers. They made observations for thousands of years, for like over like close to 1,000 years at least, and they like predicted eclipses, and they tracked the motion of Venus. They were really obsessed with Venus, and they used the motion of the stars for their agriculture. And yeah, they had a written communication system with the hieroglyphs, and we know all this information from the codices. So like if you take anything from this today, I hope you can take that, and I hope we can have more events like this in the future. I am over 20 minutes, but for someone who requested on the works cited afterwards, yeah, I can do that. And first, let me switch the screen really quick. I just want to do this really quick for, I believe someone had asked about showing the landscape on another planet. So hopefully you all can see that. Okay. So if you end up downloading Stellarium or are interested in that, I believe someone had asked about going on another planet. I personally haven't toggled with it as much, but I do see that you can set the ground on like another planet here with the landscape. So that, if you can see right here, let me go a bit forward. Yeah. I believe I would also have to switch the location, but now I've switched the landscape to the moon. And location, yeah, here you can change the planet here. If you're interested in doing this on your own, feel free to leave like any comments below, and I can try to help as much as I can. I'm also new to this, but for example, here you have the moon, and this is still set in 1220. And thank you again. This is just for, I believe someone I had asked in the chat to see this, but for everyone else who has watched and stayed along, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate all the support and hope you all learned everything. And I think this was for Elaine, if you're still here. This is what the app looks like on another planet, and I can also, just so you can see you can even set up different locations on the moon. Unfortunately, I will have to go, Elaine, but I hope this will help if you're interested in downloading it on your own. Okay. Okay. Let me see. Let me take this. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a good night. Bye bye.